this mic on? Yes. Hello. Okay, so 8:05, not too bad. This is a panel that I think you've been bugging me to do. You've been politely asking me to do since the first BasedCon. It's like he comes up to me and he's like, "Think about it."
Well, you solicited panel ideas in the first
Right.
instance for the first BasedCon, and I said, "Hey, Rob, how about Jews in space?"
And I was kind of like, haha, yeah, okay. And then you were more persistent or insistent the second time, and so we are actually going to do. I was like, he seems serious about this, and like, we have a few people who are like, I don't know if we have any. If you're the only actual Jew on the
No, I'm not Jewish. I used to edit a newspaper in Jewish community for like 6 years.
I'm circumcised. Is that getting anyone now?
we're gonna need to see proof of that. We can't take your word for
That's
it.
no skin off mine.
Anyway. Oh. Wait, okay. Well, I'm not going to touch that. So I'm going to turn it over to Lowell, who is our resident rare deepwater Jew, and
What? What is
oh.
C. Jews in space!
There's so many along protecting the hero race. Jews are in space. It's trouble and peace, the bully right up in its legs. Oh, we give them a smack, we'll slap them right up in the face.
End of History of the World Part 1, when they, after the Viking funeral and some of the other coming attractions. But as Rob was saying, I've been half jokingly and then more seriously as time has gone on, trying to get a plan on this, because I think that, especially with some of the more recent work that he's done and that Carl has done as well, and some other people, there are, I don't want to explore this from like representation because it's SpaceCon, none of that matters. So, like, I have no interest in talking about Watto in Star Wars or the Ferengi in Star Trek, because this is SpaceCon, not any of those other conventions where they would care about these things. So, to open things up, I wanted to.
That's the deep one.
The
The real mic is on the car.
Oh. Just swap out the mic.
So, yeah, so just to open things up, the example that comes to my mind when I think about, the broader theme of Jews in space is what Frank Herbert did in the later Dune books, sort of having the Jews as a sort of keeper of the collective memory from humanity before, everything in the books or even the prehistory of the books happened. And one of the notable lines in there is, I'm paraphrasing, but Frank Herbert basically has a character say that, the Jews in this time who have been sort of in hiding would be totally recognizable or not out of place from the modern eras. They could be sort of swapped in. They're sort of this unchanging relic or remnant that represents continuity with humanity's past. So, just to sort of open things up on the panel, is there any example that comes to your mind when you sort of think about the role Jews have played in, whether it's a plot element or a character notable for being Jewish in sci-fi or fantasy novels?
I do recall that at the time, the critique of Frank Herbert when he did this was either in Chapter House Dune or
it was Chapter House.
Yeah, was that, well, it's finally proof that Frank Herbert has lost it, because he went out and found Jews, and it was written, but that's the emphasis I got from this critique. It's like, okay, Dune is done. I mean, he's got Jews in it now, which I took note of. I mean, Dune was so culturally married to kind of the Arab culture with the Fremen and the greater, the Padishah Emperor, etc., the greater culture. And there was almost a sense of disappointment. Like, really, even this far, 10,000, 20,000, however, into the future, we still haven't taken care of the last one. I'm serious. That was the sense underpinning the critique. I would be happy to name names, but I can't recall. It was like a known, back in the days when it was okay for writers to review other writers. In any case,
I think the first one that comes to mind for me, it's Babylon 5. Who, they had prominent Jewish characters, and it wasn't played for like, oh, we're going to do exactly what you're talking about, But beyond that, also, even though he's a huge lefty and makes me crazy, Harry Turtledove, who is himself obviously Jewish. If you read his books, it's very apparent. But he sometimes actually has Jewish villains, or the whole, when the aliens invade Earth and Jewish people are actually on their side, it's questionable. And so he doesn't seem to mind that. He hates conservatives and blocked me on Twitter, but still, he still has done a good job, characterizing, I think, the whole range of life in the Jewish community.
As we go over to the other side, one thing, a little anecdote that comes to mind for me is that in Star Trek, Worf was actually supposed to be canonically Jewish, but they thought his character's backstory was complicated enough, with him being half Klingon and then being adopted by a human couple, that it was just a little too implausible to also make that couple be Jewish. I really think that the problem was given his Klingon forehead, where he would put on tefillin, but I think that's, in my head canon, that's really why they didn't go with it.
Yeah, I can't really think of anything to add. I don't exactly know why I'm here, but
You're here because I bugged you as part of one of your Kickstarters into actually having a book that featured the line of rare deepwater ships.
right. Yeah, I don't know if there's more to the story than that, other than the fact that there was somebody.
Yeah, there's that internet meme from I'm sure someone else will know it, but like the Fur Trapper saga, and there's this line where one of these characters, he's bragging about how he's fought a man of every race, from like a pygmy in Africa, and even he's defeated a man of every race in single combat, from a pygmy in Africa to the rare deepwater Jew. And there was just something about the line, the rare deepwater Jew.
It was so great.
Yeah.
And then, like, I don't know if I tweeted that and tagged you or whatever. We were kind of talking about it. And then, lo and behold, I think it's the 4th Iron Dragon book. Yep. Sorry, I should use my microphone. Lo and behold, that's not.
This one's on.
Lo and behold, in the 4th Iron Dragon book, I had an opportunity to use the line "rare deepwater Jew," and it completely works in context. And so Frank's been very thankful for
There's
that.
a Jewish character who's stuck rather far underwater.
Right, and it's like, which is not a common thing to happen, and that doesn't happen in Jane Austen, Jews trapped underwater.
And then Carl took it to a whole nother level.
All right, which I'll avoid spoiling that, but thinking on Jewish stuff in science fiction, I experienced Leonard Nimoy, who played the original Spock. I have to qualify that now because we have multiple Spocks running around on the TV repeats. but had drawn the Vulcan salute from Jewish practice, and when there was a Vulcan ceremony for Amok time, was drawing on that from his own heritage, to fill in some of the gaps in the script. And there's been some, a fair number of Jews in science fiction. What sticks out in my memory the most is Joel Rosenberg's Masada series, which was future space opera about the planet Masada, which was, the surviving Jews having emigrated after, a nuclear war took out Israel, and made their living by exporting mercenary troops across the galaxy. So pretty much, an excuse for a whole bunch of very lightly connected war stories. So early military science fiction, and well done stories. If you ever want to check out Joel Rosenberg.
All right, so another question I have is, again, for you two who actually are, I apologize, I'm not as familiar with your work, but I'm at least familiar with, Rob and Carl in a somewhat detailed fashion. So when you, for the two of you at least, and feel free to chime in if you guys have any other thoughts on this, when you decided to sort of have characters who were described as Jewish in your books, what was the thinking behind that, and why did you make that choice as opposed to choosing something else?
Let's see, I can think of some specific examples. In my first book, Torchship, there is a plot arc where our heroes want to go on a treasure hunt into the AI controlled space where humans have been exterminated, which includes Earth. And rather than admit they're treasure hunting, they're transporting pilgrims who want to visit Earth, which includes a pair of rabbis who have decided to make next year in Jerusalem come true for them. And so this was drawing on the heritage as giving another motivation for these rather random weird ass passengers that they had on board the ship, and having people with a traditional reason for doing this as opposed to some of the weirder ones that the other passengers had. And then I came back to having a Jewish subplot in my Censorate universe, which is this evil empire who maintains control by erasing every book when its author dies. So there is no history, there is no mythology, there is no religion. All the sacred books have been destroyed. So clearly, for Jewish tradition, they can't exist under that. And one of the main worlds was a water world, so you had the people living in arcologies on these tiny islands. You had the nomads who lived on their sea fleets, hunting the sea monsters. And then on the shallow waters around the city, you had people who were growing seaweed on the sea floor. And in book 5 of the series, when the evil empire strikes back, our hero flees to a shoaler farm with a friend, and it winds up coming out that yes, okay, these folks are in fact Jews hiding out from the Censorate, and they are just the surface representatives of a Jewish population who are a kilometer deep in the water, hiding out because on the bottom of the ocean they can avoid being detected and keep their tradition of the written law, and which is about the only place you could have them surviving under that kind of tyranny. And so, of course, what got me thinking about it was the Deepwater Jew joke, which, it's like, okay, where in this story could I have some Deepwater Jews? Originally just thinking of have an offhand throwaway joke just for some fan service.
That was what I did.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there was a reason that this character was underwater. It was more to it than that, but not this involved.
Yeah. But as I thought about it, it's like, oh, wait a minute. Suddenly connect that with things from the earlier books, and it becomes this. And that actually makes sense. And that's one of the joys of being a pantser, is when you discover you've been setting some stuff up, and rather than being totally random, you have created something wonderful without planning it at all. which kind of makes up for all of those times when you're sitting there going, "Gosh, what should happen next?" So, I don't know. Does that sufficient answer?
Great.
So as far as my answer for, I guess what my motivation is for making characters Jewish, is that basically so there's two reasons basically. One is just I like to do things that are different for me. I like to I'm always changing things up. I mentioned this earlier that I keep switching from I have a successful series, and so that I write an unsuccessful one because I want to do something different. Sometimes I write 2 or 3 unsuccessful ones in a row just to make sure I learn a lot. And so I had done this series, these Mercury books, my first novels, and they were all about Christianity and sort of Christian mythology, angels, and just kind of parodying sort of there's this bureaucracy of heaven and hell, and just kind of working out all this kind of stuff, all having to do with Christianity. So then I wrote a book called Schrodinger's Gat, which was completely different, a quantum physics noir thriller, which is also there's not a lot of, and I wanted there to be a bit of a spiritual element to it, and I thought the obvious thing to do is to make this person like Catholic, and then have a Catholic priest who is administering to them and stuff. And I thought seems a little too obvious and too close to stuff that I've already kind of, I've already dealt with Christianity. I'm like, obviously you can do a lot more with it, but I was like, I want to do something different, and obviously Christianity comes out of Judaism, and so it's fascinating, that relationship. And so I made this character Jewish, and there is a Jewish spiritual element to it that hopefully feels authentic. The other reason, I had another reason, I swear. The other reason besides just wanting to do something different is I think kind of what Lowell maybe, or somebody was referring to earlier, where it was just because Jews have this sort of insular culture that's very focused on tradition and continuity. There is the possibility of 10,000 years in the future, there are still going to be Jews, and the Jews are going to be kind of like the Jews of today. And you can't say that, like, generally in the future, we have this sort of Star Trek, future where like everybody's kind of, and now it's all intermingled races and cultures, and it's sort of vaguely American-ish Western culture, but it's like from everywhere, and nobody has any particular, religion and stuff. But then, what do you do with the Jews? And it's like Blaine was saying, earlier, you almost have to either wipe them out, or have Jews continue as they are today. Those are kind of the options. So it makes it. So I had, like, in the Iron Dragon books, there's I believe it's called New Jerusalem, which is, and it doesn't have a lot to do with the main stories, but I did explain that, because there's the sort of Chinese contingent in space, and then there's this other alliance, and then there's the Jews who are kind of doing their own thing off somewhere, and so I had to kind of explain, well, what happened to the Jews, because it seems like it's a reasonable question.
Well, we're told to write what we know, and if anybody's ever been to Baltimore, basically Baltimore historically has pretty much 2 prominent groups of people: Catholics and Jews. My undergraduate college had 20% Jewish, population. Even my Catholic high school, we had a bunch of Jewish people. And I used to edit a newspaper that was in an area that was like 60-70% Jewish, and it's just, right? So we all draw characters from people we've met, people we were impressed by. I've always found the Jewish community and culture really welcoming. It likes nerds, it's a culture that embraces people. If you got extra degrees, or you're getting a master's degree, everybody likes that. So naturally, it just seems like it's always going to be part of whatever I write.
As near as I can tell, and Robert confirmed some of this, the reason I'm on this panel is because in a comic series called Fables, that some of you may know, um, yeah, Fables was about fairy tale characters living in secret in modern day America. And they are beset in this small community by enemies on all sides in the form of an emperor and his worlds upon worlds upon worlds of evil forces. And they're going to go to war with each other. A very small, tiny community against overwhelming forces. And in the process of doing that, the Fables strike first by destroying one of the Emperor's main assets, and gives a little speech. I wanted a real world comparison. And it says, well, you won't know it, but in our world, there's this pesky little bunch of people in Israel that they stay alive just by making sure all of their enemies know that anytime you mess with us, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you big. Sometimes it's going to cost you overwhelmingly big. And that is Fabletown was the community. That is what we've officially adopted as our policy towards you from now on. You did this bad thing to us, and I just took away a considerable amount of your power in retribution. Leave us alone. This is your one warning. The readership, which is pretty loyal, Fables at the time, some element of it reacted as, oh my God, he's dragging Israel into this, and he's using this as a mouthpiece for his rabid pro-Israel views, which was silly because that was the only indication of, as I try to explain to them, it's like it was an analogy, and all analogies break down eventually. But did you understand the comparison? Because that's why it either worked or didn't work. And even the detractors admit, well, yes, I understood the point you're making, but I go, well, that's it. Now, very much like the scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where one of the knights cleverly talks the crowd out of thinking this woman is a witch by logic and good argument and reason, and then it turns out that she's a witch. I had to admit that. That said, I am rabidly pro-Israel, but that's my mother's fault. That's got nothing to do with Fables. My mother, who's well,
This is why Catholics and Jews get along. We have guilt.
well, I was raised half Jewish, half Catholic, which means
That's a superpower.
I had to go to confession, but I was allowed to bring a lawyer. Yeah, not blaming yeah. To understand my mother, I've been accused of being a mama's boy, which is not true because I was never manly enough to be the boy of that particular mom. To explain, she was one of the original members of the Manhattan Project. She worked in the Hannaford Atomic Works. My mother never, to her dying day, admitted exactly what she'd done there. We were downwind of the Hannaford atomic plant. Actually had a farm there when they were secretly venting radioactive gases. And so we were downwinders of that. And then I went into the Army and guarded and learned how to blow up nukes. We were a very nuclear family. Yeah, forgive the pun, but it's true. We all did. My mother, when I was a kid once, we had this backyard game in the neighborhood called Kill the Man with the Bat, which was a stupid name for the game because the guy with the bat was the only one that get to kill. We had this old plastic bat. We played hide and seek with it. One guy hid his eyes and counted to whatever, while the rest of us hid a bat within the allowed range. And then we played, you're getting warmer, you're getting colder, you're getting warmer, you're getting colder, until the guy who was it found the bat. Then he got to hit anyone he wanted with the bat all the way until we get back to the base. I was one of the little kids playing with the big kids, and I was standing right next to David Snyder when he found the bat. And I'm running with my tiny little legs as fast as I can to get back to base, but he is just wailing the hell out of me with this plastic bat. And finally I realized that I'm just not going to make it, and I do the only thing I can think to protect myself, which is curl up into a ball in the middle of our lawn, our backyard, and just try and protect myself, while David Snyder, who was never a good fellow, by the way, continued to wail on me. Well, then I hear salvation in the form of our backyard sliding door comes flying open. My mother comes charging out in her combat boots, like a bat out of, she, the old, your mother wears combat boots. She did. She comes flying out of there and vaults our back porch to come up and get me. And I go, okay, rescue. I can, and I didn't want to cry. I was about to cry, but I can hold out until Mom gets here. And my mother got down on her hands and knees, put her face next to mine, and said, "You better get up and run to that base, because that boy's going to kill you." That was my mom. My mom loved Israel. My mom just, if we were ever going to be able to afford to take a vacation, that's where she wanted to go, because they were the underdog. They were the scrappy country that could. She lent me her copy of Exodus, the Leon Uris book, early on. Anyway, I didn't know much about the country except that my mother supported it and dearly loved it. Never got to go. I eventually got to go, and it was eye-opening and just revelatory. Yeah, her love of this country stuck with me, and probably contributed to that, using the allegory in Fables and How Dare You. And the whole idea behind, well, you can do this, I will follow you anywhere, but don't drag Israel into this, or don't drag it's like, it just irks me. It just irks me so much that if there's such pressure to disavow and just denigrate this country, there must be something going on there worth looking into. So that's my story. That's apparently why I'm on this panel.
You completely leaned into that and were like, yes, I'm rabidly pro Israel, and that's I was desperate for Jews, as one is in these situations, and so you guys said he's now an honorary Jew. So
when I met Amy Kahn in Philadelphia, I was desperate for Jews too, but that was a completely different bit of biology at work. It just seems natural. And in the meantime, I've learned enough to underpin this kind of loyalty. I try to avoid saying that I'm rabidly I was saying that tongue in cheek, but this pro-Israel stance with facts and figures, and it is the only bastion of freedom in a very unfree part of the world, so why not?
And by the way, I think I called you Blaine earlier, so
Did you? Call me
Okay,
Blaine?
if you didn't notice, then I didn't. So it's fine. But I just was thinking. I was like, wait a minute, did I call him Blaine? So this is the stuff that goes on in the back of my head. Like, did I just call him Blaine? Okay.
David
You
Blaine, also
you
Jewish.
you may have. The only thing I've been puzzling over is this term deepwater Jew, which I've been trying to. And now I find out there's really no explanation for it at all.
It's just a funny phrase, basically.
A throwaway line. Okay, now I know.
You can Google rare deep water Jew, it'll pop right up. It'll take you to the line from that something off the coast.
Well, I'm willing to accept deepwater Jews as long as you can accept a shallow water goy.
Very nice. See, we're making friends. We're building bridges.
Yes.
So, can I? Speaking of Jewish characters in our fiction, am I allowed to mention the shared the character that shared that spot? It's spread across multiple universes. So there's a character named Lowell Benjamin that shows up, and he's not necessarily exactly the same guy, but he's always Jewish, and he's always a lawyer, and basically Lowell here has had. So how many different? He's in at least two of my universes, and he's vaguely inspired by a certain Jewish person.
Way
so
more
that we have-
competent than I could ever be.
So
At
yes,
least in one
he's-
of Rob's universes.
yes, he's competent in one, and he's kind of a sad sack in the other. So it evens out. But yeah, I did make you kind of a cool character. I mean, though he is annoying, he's pestering the main character on a plane
And being pedantic.
and
about
being pedantic,
English phrasing
right? Which is yes, modeled on
on someone you know.
on someone I know. So yeah, so we have a Jew that is spread across multiple universes, at least three different universes now. So I don't think Carl hasn't gotten Lowell in this.
Yeah.
He will.
So maybe shifting topics a little bit, or to take us back to where we started. One of the areas where it seems like Jews are often represented in sci-fi and fantasy is sort of in a satirical fashion. I mean, you saw that at the end of History of the World Part 1 with Jews in Space, but I don't think it's inaccurate to basically say that Spaceballs in and of itself is basically a Jewish sci-fi movie with Princess Vespa being a Jewish princess, and all the sort of stereotypes about how her father got her Mercedes from his cousin Murray, who's a dealer in the Valley. Just these little throwaway lines that are sort of Mel Brooks basically importing Jewish culture into the future. I think you also see it in the Firefly movie where the David Krumholtz's character, David Krumholtz looks like a stereotypical Jew, and he's married to his cyborg wife, and you see the wedding, and he's like stomping on a glass in that movie. But it's sort of
Also the male.
also the milk. But I'm just wondering if you guys have any other thoughts on why, other than the fact that somebody like Mel Brooks is making these movies, why Jews tend to be sort of in this, or Jewish humor tends to be more evident in these sort of satirical roles or satirical movies in sci-fi.
Well, for Mel Brooks, I think it's just write what you know. For culture more generally, and I kind of hate to bring this up, but there is seriously talking Jewish history. If you go back before the founding of Israel, and let's be euphemistic here, is a very grim subject.
Yeah.
And it stays grim even if you go back into Russian history and medieval European history with a lot of abuse. And so there is, I suspect, kind of a desire for a counterweight for that. Have something a little more lighthearted and cheerful. And, in science fiction, you can generally make it be whatever you want it to be. Which has not stopped a couple of authors from projecting grim futures for the Jews, but I think a lot of folks want to make it more cheerful than that.
And I think, to that point, I think there's something about, especially for Jewish authors who sort of have even if it's not the focus of the book, having Jewish characters in the future is sort of, to your point, a little bit of a psychological balm to overcome, the history of the Jews on Earth, at least, as we've known it up until, the first half of the 20th century. and say that, no matter what happens, the Jews will still be around in the future. Therefore, they haven't managed to wipe us all out yet.
I'm not sure I understand the question. What? I mean,
Why is it sort of the satirical role? I wouldn't quite call it a minstrel, maybe more of a cantor, but
okay.
role in Spaceballs, the Jews in space, or the
Why
the
are
mailman
Jews such
character.
an effective of like
Like,
butt of a
they're
joke?
sort of, not even the butt of the joke, but they are generally playing a comedic role in sort of.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean that goes back to to Jewish culture, and there's just legendarily, like all these famous comics writers are Jewish, and I don't know exactly where it comes from. I think it's partly that just the sort of grimness of and if you have a tightly knit group, you'll find that you end up with a lot of in jokes, and I think that's maybe like Israel is kind of that writ a bit larger. So it's like we've been through all this shit together for however many thousands of years now, and we've come up with all these kind of coping mechanisms, and they become very sort of finely tuned and turn into kind of brilliant humor. And it's a very deadpan, kind of low key, but also kind of crazy sort of humor, and like Woody Allen, Mel Brooks, and there's millions of others. So I don't know that I can explain
I
the
think it's
Seth Rogen. Well, okay.
We just about.
I think it's protected in that, or at least partially so. The humor is based on we're going to blatantly say things about ourselves that is worse than anything
right.
you can come up with. Partially because we're more clever than you are. You're never going to be smart enough to come up with the things to hurt us that you want to. But give it a shot. We've already been there. I mean, Mel Brooks as an example. He makes
the whole Inquisition scene. I mean,
well, yeah, but he makes fun of Hitler. Can you imagine any people making light of the worst thing that ever happened to them, that almost destroyed them as a culture? And it's like, yeah, but we're going to make jokes of it. Robert Carey, the played LeBeau in Hogan's Heroes, was a death camp survivor, and here he is in this sitcom Hogan's Heroes making Nazis look yuck, fun. What a bunch of cut-ups they are.
And all the Nazis were Jews.
And all the people that
major
played
Nazis in Hogan's Heroes were played by Jewish
So-
actors who said, "We'll do this as long as we make the Germans look bad."
right. Colonel Klink insists, or the actor who played Colonel Klink, it says he can never win. Don't ever let him have a win. So I think that's part of it. Is like, we're going to get there first before you can get there and hurt us again. And there's nothing that I think will enrage someone who's trying to persecute or belittle or whatever someone that they won't feel persecuted and belittled. Instead, they're going to laugh at you trying to hurt them. Mockery is powerful. Self-mockery, I think, included.
And it's so
In that.
and it's so much a part of our culture, because particularly early television was massively dominated by Jewish comedians who had done all the Borscht Belt humor, going around to the clubs like you see in Dirty Dancing, those kind of places, and perfecting their craft to the point where they were excellent. So they got all their early TV jobs because they were funny. And for people who are older, we were weaned on that stuff. Even if you didn't know the comedian was Jewish, that's your humor. And so it just, as much as evil people try to eradicate it, it can't erase humor.
And there is a point to that being particularly Jewish, because I've been sitting here trying to remember a single potato famine joke and just totally striking out.
Yeah, not something that comes up in movies very often, except the Leprechaun.
Yeah, in a world of how dare you say anything that makes us feel bad at all, they kind of stand fast and say, yeah, we're we're gonna go all those places that you want to, but we're gonna do a little better at it.
Yeah, I mean, the darkest comedy in human history, Mel Brooks producer.
Yeah,
Because, hey, 20 years, not 50 years, 20 years after the Holocaust, I'm doing a movie about making a play, a musical about
Yes.
Adolf Hitler. And, you know, and we're going to make a joke. And you see the New York play audience, who at the time was dominated by Jewish people in the audience, and they're overreacting. But, you know, this is that kind of level of dark humor. I mean, it's just incredible that anyone could do that.
some
And
of
to do
you
it so well.
are old enough to remember. Do you remember Tom Snyder, Coast to Coast, the late night talk show guy? Kind of a wacky dude. I mean, he went in all sorts of places, but one night he had Stanley, Jack Kirby, Carmen Infantino, and maybe someone else from DC. But the big movers and shakers of Marvel and DC Comics on his panel, and that was what the night was about. And all of these, that's the first. I guess I knew it, but this is the first I realized that these are all Jews. They're all Jewish creators. And they were sitting there, I mean, purposely, I don't know, leaning into the cliche. They all had the giant cigars and that kind of, New York Jew attitude. And Tom Snyder asked them, and I've never heard anyone before ask them, like, you're all Jewish. Half the people that work for you are Jewish. Why aren't there any Jewish superheroes? Why aren't there any Jewish characters in Marvel and DC Comics? And they didn't really have an answer, but shortly after that, there was just a brief mention that Ben Grimm was Jewish. So he got to him, and he got, just by asking that question, it's like, why is being Jewish in this like heroic milieu kind of off limits? At the same time, DC was officially, they got into a little trouble. There was a Legion of Superheroes in the future character who was clearly drawn black. He was a new introduced character called Someone the Screamer, not Agnar the Screamer, but something, clearly a black character, but it was in the coloring stage white. And then the writer, who may have been Marv Wolfman, came in and said, why did you color this guy white? And he goes, oh, in the future there are no Negroes. So there was definitely the kind of mindset that, like, some of our problems are going to be solved in the future. So, Negroes, Jews, you're all off stage now.
To your point about comics, one of the things I thought that was really, it humanized and sympathized the character, and I think it made his story and his motivations much more believable. But what they did in the X-Men series, talking about the movie specifically, with Magneto's character and making him a Holocaust survivor, and seeing the mutants as the new Jews,
Yeah, I hated
and
that.
trying to prevent the the extinction of the mutants being put into camps, and Magneto fighting against that. And now he's often portrayed as a villain, and he comes into conflict with Professor X and the X-Men. But you understand why Magneto has these views, even if you don't agree with him, based on the fact that he was in a concentration camp as a kid.
He was Romany before that, but he was villainous. The earliest Magneto was villainous through and through, and tried to destroy the world, rule the world, etc. several times. And they sort of did this. This was the first retroactively redeeming a villain that I'm aware of, and now it's just gotten infectious. Now there's no true villains in any Disney movie. There's no, everyone's
Just
got a
white
sad story. Magneto was evil, and then they made him like, oh well, now you have to understand him. It's like,
But the one true, and it's funny funny sad or funny strange, but the one true universal evil villain in everything are effing Nazis.
Yeah.
And why are they villains? Because of what they did to Jewish people. So even people, and you see these idiots on the internet particularly, who don't like Jewish people, but even then, they don't like Nazis either. It's like, the Nazis were so industrial evil that they go down in history, and that's, that is in some way imprinted also. It's like, because Jewish people survive, their villains are now the worst villains.
Denny O'Neil once in an interview that just kind of ruined my relationship with him. Beloved senior editor, writer, in an interview said, yeah, Nazis are the safe villain. We can use Nazis forever. And the interviewer, may have been Gary Groth, I'm not sure, asked, well, what about, Stalinist Russia killed just as many. And Denny O'Neil said, yeah, but at least with Russia, they were trying to do the right thing. Their hearts were in the right place, some version of that. And it's just like, oh my God. Apparently, communist villains aren't safe because apparently we love communism again and again and again and again
Just need the
until
right people in
it
charge.
works.
Yeah, it just need to do it right. It wasn't ever done right.
Nazis are the safe villain. That's why now everyone you don't like is
A Nazi.
a Nazi. Was it Brecht that said when fascism rises again, it will come in the guise of anti-fascism? So Antifa, whatever, but they're not villainous because they're anti-Nazi.
It's in the
It
name.
can't be bad. It's in the name.
Yeah, they're like the D-Day people.
And then you can point out that National Socialism is also the name of Nazis, and they don't like that.
Well, I didn't have any other things I really wanted to talk about other than mentioning that Shadowcat was also Jewish.
I think, have anybody seen Monster Squad?
Yeah,
It's,
I love-
it's generally a kids movie where they've discovered somebody is bringing back Frankenstein and Dracula, all that stuff, and they try to convince people to believe them. And they find this old guy, the creepy neighborhood old guy they thought was involved. Turns out he's a nice guy. He believes them. And the reason is because he's got the number
He
of
went
his
through
own.
it.
Because he's seen evil. He believes
I've not seen that, so maybe I will.
it's a freakishly powerful moment in kind of a kids movie, but still a good movie.
Speaking of, should I say this? The ability to laugh at the worst thing that's ever happened to you. A lady I knew, a poker player in Vegas, in my poker playing years, death camp survivor. Her favorite joke was she'd love to tell to anyone, and it was the gist is it's a long Shaggy Dog story, but I'm going to give you a short. Yep, my husband and I won the lottery. We decided to go around the world and live it up. This is the best thing. We went to Spain, we went to Portugal, we went to this, and we went to Germany and laid a wreath on the grave of Hitler, and then we went and the whoever's being talked to said, wait, you're Jewish. You laid a wreath on the grave of Hitler? You go, oh yeah. I mean, we owe him everything. He gave us the winning number. And she pulls back and reads. She reads her number. That is, I know, right?
Wow. Wow.
That's dark.
That's dark humor.
Yes. But that woman is invulnerable. If she can tell that joke, no one's gonna. Well, she died but of old age. I mean, this is a while ago. So, anyway.
I mean, I think that's a good note on which to end things officially. If there are any questions from the audience, we're happy to.
Yeah,
see
we
what
can't
can
top
answer.
that.
Yeah.
Good.
The most respectful Jews in Space version I recall reading is Orson Scott Card, who's as non-Jewish as you can get. But in his Ender series, there was some discussion, like some of the brightest kids that make it to battle school are Jewish because of the what's kind of the myth, the Moshe Dayan myth of the unbeatable tactical general Jew, and Mazer Rackham was clearly Jewish until he was retconned in one of the later books as Maori, something like that. But anyway, definitely a Jewish super genius, tactical genius character until he wasn't.
I mean, I think Turtle Dove goes more into depth a lot into Jewish culture in a lot of his books. But, yeah, I agree with, with Scott Card, some others.
I mean, Ryan Williamson, who's not here, was supposed to be on this panel. I know he had a series that had he did it as like an Amazon short with the Vela program. I think that's what it was called, and it was sort of based on some characters who, for whatever reason, adopted the Jewish religion but weren't ethnically Jewish in the future, and had some tropes about that and a bunch of language. And despite not being Jewish, full disclosure, I helped him with some of the questions he had about certain things. I remember in an early draft, he was having characters sort of mixing Yiddish and Hebrew, and I sort of explained that, well, like, you can do that, but mixing Yiddish and Hebrew together is this weird late 20th century American thing that is, existed at no other point in the history of Judaism. And so I think, trying to revive Yiddish in the future would, may not go well. And so, that little bit of technical criticism aside, I thought, Ryan did a really, respectful job. But to answer the question, I haven't really noticed, at least in my reading, anything, qualitatively different between Jewish authors and non-Jewish authors in their treatment of Judaism or how they characterize the characters. The only difference I would say is that the Jewish authors probably have much more background knowledge of their own to draw on rather than sort of needing to or wanting to check with somebody else to make sure they've gotten everything right. Yep.
Research.
The topic of allegory. Here, it's relatively well known. But if we think about Christian allegory and you have whole human CS movements, it folks that want to sell on the vision. But for the life of me, I cannot come up with a commonly well-known Jewish allegory.
Superman.
Yep.
And I would
Paul
say
L.
it's-
and he goes to Kansas and lives in obscurity, hiding his true identity because he doesn't want people to find out who he is and his superpowers.
Put her in a basket, sent down the river to be discovered.
And so now I want to follow up on your
Okay.
comment on Tom Snyder. Your Jewish creators, why do you not have Jewish, characters? You don't necessarily have to have a character if you want to tell the story because of allegory. And I think, and I think you're very much right that Superman is a Jewish allegory. But why not point that out?
Because the entertainment world at that time was very much like, you're okay, but don't get too Jewish with whatever you're doing. I think it was just hidden.
Wasn't Wakanda from the Marvel movies originally an allegory for Israel?
God, I hope.
I think it was more of like a '60s Black Power accent.
Yeah, well, I think it was
what
kind
it
of
pretended to be.
it was kind of cloaked in that, but it was this insular. Really, nobody else has heard this. So I thought the idea was that originally that you have this kind of superpower that's a very small country that's surrounded by kind of
Oh, a little bit, maybe, yeah. Jack Kirby's Fourth World was really just like, to hell with it. I'm going full, leaning into my religion and background, all that kind of stuff. Every character in the New Gods, it's all Jerusalem. It's Israel. It's two Jews.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, to Bill's point, like a lot of the, despite the anglicized names, a lot of the early comic book creators were Jewish.
There was an early story, I think it was Single Truth, where Superman goes to, I don't know if it was actually a concentration camp or a relocation camp, and like goes undercover as a Jewish person, really explaining into like columns and all that because it's Superman's world or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that stuff is great. Some of that old stuff where they were just like, they had no sense of shame. And I don't mean shame as in shame. I mean, just like, oh, there's an idea, we'll use that. That's why I love Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby never had the filters that would say don't do. I mean, when he had Mr. Miracle try and assassinate Darkseid and to do it, he pulls out Marvelous Marvo's Master Blaster to kill him. And it's just like, yep, I'm on board. I'm yours for life. That kind of sense.
But that also the issue with deadlines coming too quickly. Well,
And that's part of it. Once when we're just discussing the fact that Kirby's anatomy was a little kind of esoteric. And I think Colleen Duran said something like, oh, well, you don't have to worry about anatomy. You transcend anatomy. And that was a nice thing to say. But he was humble and practical. He goes, look, at my deadlines, this is what you're going to get. And that was his way of doing it. And it was big, it was bold, it was over the top, and just perfect.
Well, thank you all for attending. And I guess we'll take a 5-minute break before the next one, or do you want to just go right into it?
better take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
you did a good job. Thank you.